Welcome to We and Lewis, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewis and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories and their words. They are the We in Lewis. I'm Kevin McGinnis. Our guest today is Hai Do, whose life has been as remarkable as it is inspiring. Fleeing Saigon with his parents and siblings when the city fell to the North Vietnamese army, they escaped by boat and eventually ended up in the United States. With the courage and work ethic often found in so many immigrants to this country, he overcame language and cultural barriers to become a journalist and photographer with United Press International, a photographer with Agence France-Press, was the assistant managing editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and currently is the chief of the Learning English division of Voice of America. Hai's photographed and written about every conceivable walk of life, from people, refugees, politicians, and major news stories around the world, as well as most major U.S. sporting events, including Super Bowls, World Series, an NCAA Final Four, and an Olympics. Our sponsors today are the sister restaurants Kindle and Half Full. Located in downtown Lewis, Kindle offers seasonal American fare with a French influence, an amazing selection of wines by the glass, and an atmosphere that makes anyone feel they're not just welcome, but a regular. Right next door, Half Full doles out exquisite gourmet pizzas and wine, which we all know are the two most important adult food groups. And keep an eye out for their weekly specials. They really are amazing. Our interview with Hai Do extends over 2 episodes. The first focuses on his family's escape from Vietnam when Saigon fell. This episode reveals how that experience shaped and enabled the rest of his remarkable life here in the United States and abroad.
I'm working in journalism, which is possibly one of the most difficult professions that you've seen. You know, I've started back in 1980, and steadily one news organization after another folded. The profession itself have shedded, I would say, more than 50% of journalists at this point. You go through, I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer at one point, and when I was there as assistant managing editor, there was over 1,000 person in the newsroom. I think the Inquirer might have like 200 or less at this point. What happened to that 800 some journalists? A lot of them retired, lost their job, and had to move on. So yeah, it's a difficult profession, but I've always managed to thrive, no matter what it is. And I think the reason is that I'm always trying to learn new skill set. I mean, I started as a photographer. I've learned how to write. I mean, I'm mainly a writer now. Thank God my English is getting a little better. You know.
And you, because of your career, you had to jump into this whole social media world. You had to.
That's exactly it. I was working as a photographer, and then I became a writer, and I became a digital guru. I mean, when I was at the Inquirer, I oversee the website, I oversee multimedia.
How did you learn how to run a website?
You know, that's the thing they call library and books. It's like you sort of wing it and you realize, okay, I need to learn some coding here, even if I have absolutely no experience in this. I have to understand what HTML is. I have to understand what CSS is. And there's always book. And I just found out that you just go and check out a whole bunch of them and start reading and stay overnight, all night long, read one after another and start experiment and just fail a few times and you figure it out.
Now, was this the approach that got you to UPI? Because most people today have forgotten that back during this era, there was Associated Press, AP, and then was UPI, and they were sort of equal, the United Press International.
That was the biggest competition. That was UPI and AP at the time. I mean, I remember I used to go to assignment, an AP photographer and UPI photographer, that's it. That's all you need. And the whole thing, we can actually decide it, how the whole event is going to come out in front of us. we would go to an arena and we decide that, okay, I'll take this slot, you take this slot. Now the rest of you guys can take whatever left over. I mean, that's how it used to be. It was a competition between UPI and AP. It was very fierce, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that.
So how did you get hired at UPI?
I just sort of made myself sort of indispensable. I think that's how I get hired in a lot of different jobs. What happened was that I was doing like all different jobs. I was mixing chemistry for photographer in the Troy Record. I was selling camera, and at the same time I'm knocking UPI door because they need freelance photographer helping out. So I'm always making myself available every time there's a freelance assignments coming up with UPI, and it started. My bug in photography started with a pretty major assignment for UPI at the time. Remember the apartheid policy in South Africa at the time and the U.S., there was a lot of frictions. And South Africa at the time has a rugby team called the Springbok. The Springbok was touring around the world, and then it came to the U.S. Nobody wants to host the Springbok because it's a national team of an apartheid regime. So the city of Albany said, we'll host you, right? So they decided to host the Springbok team, and the Schenectady, the reason why is that the Schenectady Rugby Club, which is in the city right next to Albany, want to host the Springbok team as a friendly game. Couple days before the game, the headquarters of the Schenectady Rugby Club blew up. So UPI sent in a whole bunch of photographers and all sort of people was covering this game. It was a nothing game, but because of the explosion, so everybody became the biggest news story for that week or that weekend. So everybody came in, and UPI was looking for a person to pick up film from photographer, mixing chemistry and doing the lab. Of course, that was me. So I show up and did all these things. And I saw the excitement, the hubbub. At that time, I didn't really know much about journalism yet because I'm just beginning to, because working for the Record, as I mentioned, about covering the fire for the first time. And I saw the excitement with all the UPI photographer, all these things. I'm just craning my neck listening to this guy, BSing about, life as a photographer. I said, this is really cool. This is really good. I really want to do this. And I want to be one of these guys, right? So I just set a path to myself that I want to take one of these jobs. I want to become a UPI photographer. And I just work harder than anybody else. I did as much as I could and shot as much as I could. The job opened up and they offered it to me. I mean, that happened. I work harder than anybody else around me.
So you hustle. You do anything they ask you to do.
Yeah.
You get a job with UPI. But, what year was that?
1982.
So 1982. Fairly quickly, though, you're suddenly with the governor of New York taking pictures, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you became, in a way, part of the Cuomo family.
Not quite, but pretty close.
Okay, well, we can say...
Not quite. I didn't marry any of your daughters.
But you married one of the staffers.
Well, what happened was that if anybody remember Mario Cuomo, I mean, I have a lot of affinity and admiration for the governor Mario Cuomo at the time. If you remember at the time, Mario Cuomo had this big things about this being the son of immigrant, and he's talking about he's an old FDR. You lift the nation from the bootstrap and bring it up. FDR,
the rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah.
FDR lift himself from the chair, to lift the rest of the nations, and that's the sort of philosophy that Cuomo was, and he was very big on the fact that his father was an immigrant, from Italy, with a storefront. And then by his generation, he's a son of an immigrant. He became governor of one of the greatest states. He always like to say the greatest state in the greatest nations on earth. That's the Cuomo line. So 1985 was shortly. I was with UPI for a few years now, like 2-3 years. And in 1985 was the Statue of Liberty Centennial. I decided, well, I'm going to be traveling a lot, so I need to become a citizen and get U.S. passport and did all these things. So I got sworn in. I applied, became citizen in 1985. Got sworn into the whole Statue of Liberty Centennial and all these things. My wife, who's not my wife at the time, her name is Kathleen Meehan, and she was a press officer for Mario Cuomo at the time. I was very popular with the press corps in Albany because we're playing softball. We hang out. We went to bar and that sort of thing. So a couple of them decided to do a story about this photographer who, escaped from Vietnam. Who's now working for UPI and this and that. So my wife, Kathy, her name is Kathy. At the time she saw these things, she told Cuomo, and she said, "Gov, you talked a lot about being the son of an immigrant. You know that Hai is an immigrant himself." And so Cuomo, Mario asked her, and she said, here's a story. Here's some of the things. So the next day after I sworn in as a citizen, he invited me to stop by the office to chat a little bit. And so I came by the office to chat. And we talked a little bit about it. And I think that from that conversation, we sort of developed a rapport. It became that, almost like an edict from the governor, like Hai is the governor's favorite. Whatever he wants, he get, So if I want an exclusive photo, I just send a note and I say, hey, I want to do this. You got it. And if you remember at the time, after his speech in 1982 at the San Francisco conventions,
yes,
the Tale of Two Cities, and Cuomo was a rising star at the time.
Absolutely.
And everybody was preparing for him to run for president. You remember the whole story about there was 2 airplanes at the Albany airport waiting to take the governor to New Hampshire to register. And, I was involved in that whole
Oh, were you really?
They were actually already had a seat for me on that plane and everything. But, when he came out that day to make a speech, when he came out, I looked at him. I just, he's not running. I just know it, But anyway, so I became fairly close to the governor. It has a lot to do with the fact that he's talking about he himself being a son of an immigrant and knowing that I myself is an immigrant. So we develop a sort of almost a sort of a closeness, because of our background. And I was able to, I spent some time cover him, and I ended up, Kathy, who introduced me to the governor, and I ended up dating. And the first time people ever found out is one of the funniest story. We were just Kathy, my wife and I was hanging out at her apartment, because her apartment is only 3 blocks from the Capitol building, so it's real close. So we hang out there a lot of time. I spent a lot of time there because we both ended up doing a lot of work in the Capitol. So on a Sunday morning, which is the usual, couple hanging out, reading the big, thick New York Times, and a phone call came in. A phone call came in from a state trooper to Kathy, and it was the thruway bridge in New York collapsed, in upstate New York collapsed. So they informed Kathy before anybody else, and she called Cuomo and informed him. We called back. Kathy she hopped into the shower, because now she has to go and work. And the phone rang again. She couldn't answer. I picked it up. It was Cuomo. So I'm just kind of like sheepishly say, hi, Governor. And so we're very businesslike, all these things. From what I understood is afterward, the governor said to his assistant, her name is Pam. He said, Pam, you never believe who answered the phone at Kathy's. It was Haido. that's how people found out that we were dating, and then we got married, and we've been married for 39 some years now.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But a lot of times with the photographer, when you have a job like that, you become they grow very comfortable with you, and you get sort of drawn in a way no reporter could.
They give you a lot of access, but it doesn't mean that you cater to them at all. And I'm possibly tougher, in my coverage of Cuomo than most people.
Were you writing as well?
No, I was not writing.
When it was just the photographer.
It was photography. I frequently tipped up our reporters on things that I've seen and heard and that sort of thing. But also, I'm trying to keep a line, the thing that is very privileged, that I would not cross that line, because, you happen to be very close to the governor, have a lot of access, but also at the same time, you married one of his press officer, or dating, at the time. So you try to keep the line of professional separate from it and not betraying it. And I think one reason why they give me access, because they realize I would not betray that line. I would not cross over that line. Yeah.
So here you are. You're involved in one of the major political families in the country, a potential Democratic presidential nominee. So you're at the epicenter of politics, but you're doing other things as well. You also, at the time, I believe, or shortly thereafter, you were covering a World Series, a Super Bowl,
I covered
the Final Four, the Olympics. I mean,
yes, yeah, I cover. I'm actually I cover 10 World Series.
10 World Series.
Yeah. It's one of I happen to enjoy baseball a lot. So
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled. I was going to ask you a question. As a baseball guy,
Yeah.
which sport did you like best to cover?
I mean, I like all of them. Each of them is very unique in its own way. But if you ask me what sports I watch more than anything else, I would say baseball. Because I sort of trained my son how to play baseball. I taught him how to hit. I taught him how to feel and do all these things. Nobody taught me those things. I just kind of like pick it up and read books, And when I'm reading the Pete Rose's book about the art of hitting, and taking everything in there and teaching my son how to hit, and I'm reading as much as I can about fielding. I mean, when I first picked up a baseball gloves, I thought you're supposed to pick it up with your right hand. If you're righty, I didn't realize how can you catch with your left hand? You're not lefty. Didn't realize it until you begin to realize you need your right hand to throw. So a lot of these things, again, I've learned how to play as I play softball, more like by reading and practicing and focusing. And I'm not so bad at it, because I think my son, my older son Tim, was actually the captain of his baseball team when we were in Pennsylvania at Unionville High School. He was a captain of the team that went a whisker away from winning the state championships.
That's tremendous. And I have to say, having been a little familiar with youth baseball and youth baseball instruction, I'm more than confident your son was getting much better instruction than a lot of the other kids who are paying top dollar to be on travel teams and so on. Color photos came into being with, I think,
yes.
USA,
yes.
USA Today.
Yes.
And
yes.
Like you do, there was a meeting. And tell us about that meeting.
Yes. This is a pretty funny. I was very new with UPI at the time. It was like, I think 1982, something. I literally just joined the company. And what happened is that 1982 is when news organizations like USA Today beginning to start publish color photo. Europe was a little bit ahead of us at the time, and they start publishing color photo too. So the major assignment that's of interest that most people possibly didn't even know much at the time was the America's Cup off Newport, Rhode Island. Back then, 1982, most American possibly, unless you live in Newport, possibly never even heard of the thing. But for the Europeans, for people in Europe, the America's Cup is one of the biggest things. So they contact UPI main headquarters and say, hey, listen, we need color photo, we need this, we need that, we need all this kind of coverage. So UPI has a big group of photographers. There's a big operation out there covering this, but nobody knows how to do color, you know. And so the boss was saying, who knows color around here? And of course, I know absolutely nothing about color. Up until that, I had one course in photography, Photo 101, how to process black and white film. And I raised my hand to say that, yes, I know about color. I went to school for it. and the only reason why I did that, because I want to go to this assignment out in Newport, Rhode Island. It's an assignment, you know, from what I can see, it's a great assignment. You know, you're out covering these boats, chasing it around. I know next to nothing about boats. I know next to nothing about color, but I just raised my hand. And so the boss, you know, Larry DeSantis, who was the managing editor for photos at the time, I said, okay, hi, pack your bag. You're heading out there tomorrow. So I left the office. I went to a library. I went to the camera store. I picked up every single books, everything about how to process color film, how to make color print, how to do this and what you need. I literally just like left the office like that afternoon, get all the books, read up all night long about all the things I need to do, went to the camera shop the next morning, bought the things I need, drove all the way to Newport, show up as the color expert who just learned about how to do it overnight. Yeah.
You left UPI and you went to the Inquirer.
Yeah.
And what
I worked for Gannet actually for 10 years
Gannet.
before that, and then the Inquirer. During the time I was at Gannet, September 11 happened. And the day when September 11 happened was one of these things. I was driving into work, and my wife was working for a college in by the time she left government service, she worked for colleges in northern New Jersey at the time. And I was working for Gannet. I was driving to work, and I heard, you know, the air traffic report that, you know, it looked like a small plane might have hit the tower, is burning. My first instinct when I heard that was that, no shit, that was some sort of attack on the tower. If people went by, when I was working for AFP, the first explosion of the tower, if anybody remember, the Twin Tower was attacked with the 3-layer of garage collapse. I took that photo of the 3-layer of garage collapse. I was working for AFP at the time. I made my way in there and photographed the explosion and the collapsed tower, the interior. And I also spent time chasing all the terrorist activity in Jersey City. And Sheikh Abdul Rahman, you know, the Egyptian Sheikh, I photographed him. The informant with the FBI informant, I photographed the guy too at the time. So I was very familiar with that whole story. And when it happened, my first instinct was that this is some sort of terrorist attack. I had all the photographers who was working for Gannet at the time on speed dial. I just speed dial one after another. I sent them into the city. I speed dial next one, send them into the city. When we gathering in the newsroom that morning, and everybody...
And where is the newsroom at this point?
In White Plains at the time.
White Plains, okay.
Yeah. So we got in the White Plains newsrooms at the time, and different departments were saying about what they're doing, this and that. People were still struggling. This is like 10 o'clock in the morning. They were still trying to say, okay, they're going to get such and such person to go this and that. And when it was my turn, I said, Henry Freeman was the editor at the time. I said, this is what we have. And I read off the list of which photographers where, what they were, who's now in Ground Zero, who's at Yankee Stadium, who's at the Pentagon, and who's on this way to Pennsylvania, and all the location throughout. And Henry, who was the editor at the time, he looked at me like, my God, somebody who's really know what he's doing. People were still trying to figure out the coverage. This guy has already had everybody in all the places that we need. I remember a photographer named Ricky Flores at the time, and Ricky was one of the staff photographers at Gannet at the time. He was trying to get into the city. And he said, hi, they wouldn't let us in, you know. I said, where are you? He said, I'm on 3rd Avenue Bridge. I said, move to second, move to the other bridge, take another one, another photographer was saying, hi, they wouldn't let us drive in. I said, I don't care how you get in. Ditch your car, walk if you have to. I was screaming at directions, telling people where to go. Ricky Flores is the guy who came back. He was completely covered in ash, everything. You remember there was 2 different versions of the photo of the 3 firefighters with American flag? The version that people think of is not a really good version. There was actually a better version, shot from a different angles, with the entire Twin Towers collapsed in the background, and one of the firefighters was holding his head with the flag flying, looking from above with the whole destruction. It was shot by Ricky Flores at Gannet at the time. So the direction that I gave to the staff at the time and the position that I put people in that day, by the time we put the papers together that day, Henry, after he and I decide what the front page, we put the 3 firefighters and the American flag on the front page with the headline, A New Day of Infamy. It came straight from Bush's speech. And then he turned to me and he said, hi, it's your paper today. You take it. The reason why was because we had all sort of photos from every conceivable angle, all kind of coverages throughout. He turned the paper over to me that day.
So you could put in so many more photos than normal.
With extra editions. We had a photographer who was on the Henry Hudson replica doing a feature story when the tower collapsed. He photographed that. We had a photographer on his way to Virginia to a story about the pipeline. I diverted him to the Pentagon for the explosion. It was one of these things that everything that I did that day, and I did not pick up a camera, but was like my first test as an editor. And I think that what I did that day, people still remember. And I think that was one reason why when I was getting ready to leave Gannet, I was being recruited by, honestly, like every single newspaper in America.
What did you do at the Inquirer?
At the Inquirer, I starting out as director of photography. They hired me as director of photography. And by the time I left, after about 5 years, I became assistant managing editor, oversee multimedia, which is including the website and multimedia. And then they throw in national and foreign news too. So I ended up, by the end, I was in charge of several different departments by default because I'm the last man standing.
And then you got caught up in the sale of the newspaper.
Yes. One reason why I left it, when I went to the Inquirer, I thought this is it. This is a destination paper. I'm going to end my career here, and I'm going to stay here for the rest of my career. We have a comfortable life in Pennsylvania. We love it. We love our neighbors, our friends, and the papers and everything. But the paper was bought and sold because news organization went through a lot of turmoil. So the paper was bought and sold several times. It finally went to a local group that run by Jerry Lenfest, George Norcross, and Lou Katz. And if people in Philadelphia are very familiar with those 3 names, those are 3 of the biggest names in Philadelphia. And so there was a power struggle among the ownership group about which directions they want to take it. And as head of the digital operation, I sort of get caught in there because one group wants to take the digital operation this way, another group wants to take the digital operation this way, the other way. So I sort of get caught in between, and it became fairly uncomfortable. And so VOA just had a job, and they were looking for somebody to run their website, the digital operations at Voice of America. And then I guess they interviewed me, and they brought me in to revamp the digital operations, and I've been there ever since.
Hi. Given that your exposure to Voice of America starts back in Vietnam, with your grandfather, listening late at night to their broadcast. When you walked into that building for the interview, how did it feel?
You know, the irony things is this though. I listened to the Voice of America and I didn't think much of it. Even when I went to the building to interview and talking with the people, it didn't even occur to me that I'm going full circle here. You know, at the time, I'm just like, okay, they're looking for somebody to run the digital operations to improve it, because people who's been working at Voice of America for a long time, the background is radio broadcaster. They don't know much about digital. They don't know anything about the internet, and they're looking for somebody with experience with the internet, social media, and everything too. So I came to that building thinking about that more than the radio part, and honestly, it didn't even occur to me until after they hired me, and then they put my face up into like, this is one of our poster child, almost, that it dawned on me, wow, yeah. I grew up listening to the Voice of America, and now I'm running one of the Voice of America operation and broadcast to the rest of the world. And I think that's when it dawned on me that what I just did, up until that moment, you didn't think of it. You kind of forgot, because you just caught up in like, oh, this is a new job, this is a new thing. I didn't even think that I was going back full circle up until the moment when they interviewed me and then put up my pictures and my biography, that it occurred to me that, oh, this is pretty cool.
When did your assignments start taking you overseas?
It started pretty early on with UPI. I mean, I ended up covering like things like Olympics, I covered the I think I spent about a month in Israel for the Intifada, and that was an experience. Yeah, because when I was covering the war in Israel, and I came home and I said to my wife, I said, I don't understand why, now that we're facing the situation right now between Hamas and Israel. But at the time I was thinking to myself, and I said to my wife, I don't understand why people in Israel and the Palestinians have so much in common. They're almost like brothers from, different mothers. But they fought tooth and nail to it. They possibly have more common with each other than I myself could ever had. And it's painful to see that people, are killing with each other. But then again, throughout history, friends and neighbors and families are one who fight with each other, not people from the other side of the world. Vietnam has fought against China for thousands of years. The Ukrainian is fighting the Russians, who possibly have more to do with each, closer to each other than we ever had. The French and the German have fought against each other how many world war now, So I think that war, in a way, is that the tendency is that people who are friends and neighbors and families are the one who fight with each other. The conflict in Israel right now, as tragic as it is, people in Israel, in the Jewish state, and people in the Palestinian territory have more in common with each other than us could ever be.
When did you start filming and writing in refugee camps?
I start doing work in the refugee camp when I worked with Voice of America. What happened is that you were familiar with Rohingya refugees who had to leave Burma, and they moved to across the river to Bangladesh. They're sort of like people without a state. The people in Burma do not want them, and the people in Bangladesh do not want them. So they're sort of hanging in between and neither country would want the Rohingya to have a part of them. Part of the agreement that the UN has with Bangladesh to house the Rohingya refugee in Cox's Bazar area was that they are not allowed to attend school. They're not allowed to have educations in the Bangladesh system, because by having them part of the Bangladesh education system, you sort of integrate them into Bangladesh society. But the government of Bangladesh didn't want that to happen. So the UN took it upon themselves to come up some sort of education system for refugees, and one of them is that they're allowed to study English. So they're allowed to, the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar is allowed to study English. So the UN reached out to us at Voice of America and say, we need some help with this. So my boss at VOA said, hi, you should be responsible for this. And I brought my staff together and we came up with curriculum and with training program. And we went there a couple of times trying to set up English education program for the refugee and start teaching, the refugee in English.
You mentioned that it didn't really hit you when you went to Voice of America for a job interview, sort of the touchstones in your life with this organization. But you listen to your stories, and here you are dodging Viet Cong, dodging the NVA as you're trying to escape the fighting. And now you're talking with Cuomo. You're talking with the governor of one of the biggest states, if not the biggest, and at least at that time, in the United States. You're going to a yacht race. I mean, the ultimate wealthy person, sport. You're doing these things. It sounds almost a bit surreal.
Not so much surreal, but I think it sort of shows the ability to adapt to anything. And I mean, I'm going to be honest. When I first came to this country, I didn't know how to use a knife and fork. I mean, I can sit down and talk to you about wine and scotch right now.
Well, Steve would be very happy to point out, you know so much more than I do about scotch. It would be painful. It would be painful. He would have to translate for me.
You know what it is that the years of growing up in that kind of adversity give you the ability to adapt yourself into every situation. I can walk into any situation and still feel myself completely at ease. And the reason why was that the ability to adapt myself to whatever situation is at hand. I think that's the key. It's not surreal. You sort of take it almost like it's a given. Like, I could walk into any situation, meet with anybody, do anything, and never feel out of place. Because the ability to adapt yourself to whether it's danger, whether it's high society, whether, learning how to eat with a chopstick or learning how to eat with fork and knife, which glasses to pick up, which drink to have. I mean, you sort of adapt to yourself. It's not surreal so much as the ability to adjust and adapt to whatever setting and blend in. It's actually a pretty good skill for photographers too. I mean, one of the skills I have as a photographer, I can walk into any situations and just blend into the woodwork, and nobody would even know I was there.
What led you to Lewis?
My wife and I took the ferry from Cape May, where we usually vacation, to Lewis to visit one of our neighbors who had a place here in Lewis. And when we took the ferry across, we came into town and visit our friends, and we went around. We said, wow, this is such a charming place. And I think we made the decision right then and there that we're going to move here when we're ready to hang up, our spikes and retire. And so I'm not quite retired yet, but I still have a few more years of working. But yeah, we love it here. We really
do you have two boys?
I have 2 boys. Yeah.
And do they visit? Do they like it here?
One of them is with us right now. He does not like it because he said there's too many old people here, and he's in the process of moving further back to like the southwestern Pennsylvania where we used to live, or Wilmington area, because he has a lot of friends there in that area. So he's in the process of moving back there. The other one is still a student. He's a graduate student at Jacobs School of Music, trained to be an opera singer.
Really? Wow.
We're very excited for him, and it's really funny. I remember when we brought him to college the first day on the way to school. He undergraduate, he went to University of Delaware, and we on the way there, and he said to us, you guys are pretty cool. And I said, why would you say that? And he said, well, if any kid come up and tell their parents that I want to become an opera singer, they would possibly like freak out, but you seems to be okay. And I said to him, well, his name is Jeremy. I said, Jeremy, you know my background. I mean, what you need to do is just do what you love in life. Yeah. And he loves opera, and I think I hope he's going to be successful. And but the key thing is that I've said to him is just love what you do, And Kevin, I love what I do. I mean, no matter what it is, I love it when I was a photographer. I love it when I was a writer. I love it when I'm going to the refugee camp, helping people, learning English and helping people with their educations. I think that's the key. Just love what you do.
You've been all over the world. You've handled all of these disputes. You've covered wars. You've been involved in wars. You're here now in Lewis. And one of the biggest divisions in Lewis is between pickleball players and tennis players.
Oh, yes.
At times, it almost sounds like disputes in the 1800s between sheep herders and cattle ranchers. Have you chosen a side, or do you play both?
I play both tennis and pickleball. I straddle both sides. I'm in between. Some of my closest friends are pickleball player, and some of my closest friends are tennis player. And as a matter of fact, some of them are at each other's throat. And I think that they both know that I'm both a very avid tennis player and very avid pickleball players. They're 2 different sports. They very much alike, but they're also very much different. It's almost like a lot of things in life, At first appearance, it looked like it's the same sport, but it's not. It's 2 entirely different sports. It requires 2 different skill sets completely. And I just happen to enjoy both of them. Each of them has its quality. When I'm playing tennis, I'm a tennis player. When I'm playing pickleball, I'm a pickleball player. And I'm good with both.
So that is exactly the answer I would expect for someone whose parents told you to go to the, if you were asked, you went to the church with the I. Hi, yes. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your willingness to join us today and share so much about your life. You've navigated around and through so much of American society with such success and good humor. I don't know how anyone can listen to your story and leave uninspired.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks to today's sponsor, the sister restaurants Kindle and Half Full. They are very much at the center of our incredible restaurant community and play a key role in all that makes our town so appealing. And most importantly, on behalf of Steve and I and the rest of the team, thank you for listening and for your encouragement and support. To learn more about the show, please follow us on Instagram or Facebook at We and Lewis, the podcast. Also, there are still a few We and Lewis baseball hats available at Shorebreak, but you better act quickly because they're almost sold out. Have a wonderful day. Until next time, this has been We and Lewis, the podcast.